Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, I share real-life stories of betrayal, resilience, and sweet, sweet justice. Today's story, it's going to make your blood boil, but stick around because by the end, I promise you'll be cheering. Before we dive in, make sure you hit that subscribe button and tap the bell so you never miss a story. Trust me, you don't want to miss how this one ends. Picture this, it's your 55th birthday. You've spent 32 years building a life with a man you thought was your partner, your best friend, your forever. You're standing in your favorite blue dress, hair done up nice, feeling like a queen in your own little kingdom. He told you that morning there'd be a big surprise. Wear something nice, he said. We're celebrating you. So when the doorbell rings at 7 o'clock sharp, your heart does that little flutter. Maybe it's flowers. Maybe it's that necklace you've been hinting at. Maybe he's finally planned something romantic after all these years. You open the door, and there he stands, your husband. But he's not alone. There's a woman you've never seen before, a striking brunette in her late 40s, with perfume so cheap and floral it invades your home before she even steps inside. Flanking her like bodyguards are two young adults, a boy around 25, tall, avoiding your eyes, a girl, maybe 22, with your husband's exact green eyes, and a smirk on her face like this whole thing is some kind of joke. "Happy birthday, honey," your husband says. His voice cracks just a touch. "Meet Elena and our kids, Jason and Mia." Our kids. The words hit like a sledgehammer to the chest. The air leaves your lungs. The world tilts, and all you can do is stand there, frozen, while your husband ushers his secret family into your home, the home you built, the life you sacrificed for, like he's introducing old friends. "I thought on your birthday," he says, closing the door behind them like he's sealing your fate, "we could all come together as one big family." One big family. 30 years. He'd hidden them for 30 years. While I raised our children alone through his business trips, while I put my career on hold, while I forgave the late nights, the distance, the excuses, he was building another life, another family, funded by my sacrifices. They thought I would crumble. They thought I would cry, beg, maybe even accept it. But here's what my husband didn't know. What none of them knew. I wasn't just a devoted wife. I wasn't just a mother who'd given everything. I was a woman with resources he'd dismissed, connections he'd never bothered to learn about, and a patience that was about to become his complete undoing. They walked into my home expecting a doormat. They found a woman with a plan. If you've ever been blindsided by someone who should have loved you, this story is for you. Let's dive in. The morning of my 55th birthday began the way all my mornings had for the past 3 decades, with ritual, with routine, with the quiet comfort of a life I thought I understood. I woke before the alarm, as always, 5:45. The bedroom was still dark, Mark's breathing steady beside me. I slipped out without disturbing him, feet finding the familiar path to the kitchen. First, the coffee maker. Then the lavender candle on the windowsill, my little indulgence, my signal that the day had officially begun. The flame caught, and the scent curled through the room, soft and grounding. 32 years of marriage. 2 kids raised and launched into the world. Alex, 28 now, building software in California. Becca, 26, teaching 3rd graders in New York. The house was quieter without them, but I'd learned to love the stillness. The garden out back. My work as a financial consultant, steady clients who trusted me with their futures, Mark's career at the tech firm, finally stable after years of climbing. We'd built something, I thought. Something real. I cracked eggs into the pan, over easy for him, scrambled for me, and dropped bread into the toaster. The kitchen filled with the sounds and smells of ordinary love. Butter sizzling, coffee brewing, a life in motion. Mark appeared in the doorway around 7, still in his robe, hair rumpled in that way I'd found charming since we were 22 years old. He crossed the room, kissed my cheek, and poured himself a cup. "Big surprise tonight, Laura," he said, eyes twinkling with that boyish mischief I'd fallen for decades ago. "Wear something nice. We're celebrating you." My heart did a little skip. Maybe a romantic dinner downtown. Maybe that sapphire pendant I'd pointed out last month. After 32 years, you don't expect grand gestures, but the small ones still matter. "Should I be worried?" I teased. "You should be excited." He grinned, grabbing his briefcase. "Trust me. Trust me." I watched him walk out the door, sunlight catching the gray at his temples, and I felt something I can only describe as contentment. Dangerous, fragile contentment. I didn't know then that his grin hid 30 years of lies, that his surprise would shatter everything I believed about my life, my marriage, my own judgment. But I would learn. I spent the day treating myself the way you do when you hit a milestone birthday. Spa appointment in the morning, a long lunch with my best friend Sarah, an hour wandering the bookstore downtown just because I could. By 6 o'clock, I was home, showered, and standing in front of my closet. The blue dress. It was my favorite. Elegant without trying too hard, the kind of dress that made me feel like myself, only slightly more polished. I did my hair up, added the earrings Alex and Becca had given me for Christmas, and studied my reflection. 55, still standing. Still here. I lit a few candles in the living room, set out the birthday cake I'd baked myself, chocolate with raspberry filling, Mark's favorite, and waited. The house smelled like sugar and possibility. The doorbell rang at exactly 7. I smoothed my dress, checked my lipstick one last time in the hallway mirror, and opened the door with a smile already forming. It died on my face. Mark stood on the porch, but he wasn't alone. His arm was wrapped around a woman I had never seen before. Tall, brunette, probably late 40s with sharp cheekbones and a dress that clung a little too desperately. Behind her stood 2 young adults, a man around 25, broad-shouldered, eyes fixed on the ground, a woman maybe 22, pretty in that Instagram filter way with a smirk playing at her lips like she was in on a joke I hadn't heard yet. The brunette's perfume hit me first. Cheap, floral, aggressive. It pushed past the threshold before she did, invading my home, my space, my carefully constructed evening. "Happy birthday, honey," Mark said. His voice cracked. Just slightly, just enough. "Meet Elena, and our kids, Jason and Mia." Our kids. The words didn't make sense. They hung in the air like a foreign language, syllables I recognized but couldn't assemble into meaning. Our kids. Our kids. Elena stepped forward, touching my arm with manicured fingers. "Laura, we've heard so much about you. Mark says you're wonderful." Her voice dripped with something that wanted to be sympathy but landed closer to pity. I stared at her hand on my arm, the nerve of it, the audacity, and felt my skin crawl. Mark ushered them inside, closing the door behind them like he was sealing us all into some twisted snow globe. "I've been meaning to tell you for years," he said, words tumbling out too fast now. "Elena and I met on one of my business trips 30 years ago. We have a life together, too. I thought tonight, on your birthday, we could all come together. One big family. One big family." Jason shifted his weight, still refusing to meet my eyes. Guilt. That's what I saw in his posture, his downturned face. He knew this was wrong. Mia, though. Mia looked around my living room like she was appraising real estate. Her eyes landed on the birthday cake, then slid to me with something like amusement. "Isn't this exciting?" she said. "Dad's been talking about this forever." Forever. He'd been planning this forever. I looked at the cake I'd baked, the candles I'd set out, the home I decorated for a celebration that was supposed to be mine, and I smiled, not because I was happy, because I understood in that moment that the woman they expected me to be, the woman who would crumble, who would cry, who would beg for explanations, she didn't exist. I was already cataloging, already calculating, already noting every detail I would need later. "Well," I said, my voice steadier than my heartbeat, This is certainly a surprise. They stayed for dinner. My birthday dinner. The one I had prepared for 2 stretched impossibly to feed 5. I moved through the kitchen on autopilot, pulling extra plates from the cabinet, slicing the roast into thinner portions, assembling a meal for the people who had just detonated my entire existence. Mark hovered nearby, trying to help, getting in my way. "Let me get the wine," he offered, reaching for my favorite vintage, a bottle I'd been saving for tonight. I watched him pour 5 glasses, watched Elena settle into my chair at the dining table like she belonged there, watched Jason and Mia take seats on either side of her, a unified front against me in my own home. "To new beginnings," Mark said, raising his glass. Crystal clinked, wine swirled. I brought the glass to my lips and tasted nothing but acid. Elena did most of the talking. She had that gift some people have, filling silence with words that sound like conversation but carry no real substance. She told me about their condo in Portland, 3 bedrooms, a view of the river, close to downtown, perfect for entertaining. "Mark picked it out," she said, smiling at him like he'd hung the moon. "He has such good taste." Good taste. The house we lived in, the one I decorated, the garden I'd tended for 15 years, that was my taste, my work, my life, and all along he'd been building another one with her. Jason spoke next, almost reluctantly. "I work at Dad's company now, started in the marketing department last year." Dad's company, the firm where Mark was an executive. The place he'd claimed was so competitive, so political, that he couldn't possibly help our own son, Alex, get an interview there 3 years ago. "That's wonderful," I heard myself say. "How did that happen?" "Dad put in a word." Jason shrugged, finally meeting my eyes for half a second before looking away again. Of course he did. Mia barely touched her food, too busy complaining about her life, the apartment that was too small, the car that needed repairs, the tuition that was absolutely killing her. "But Dad takes care of it," she added, twirling her fork. "He always does. Tuition, car repairs, an apartment." I thought about the years I'd worked part-time so we could save for retirement, the vacations we didn't take, the home improvements we postponed, all those investments gone bad that Mark mentioned over the years, the mysterious dips in our savings he'd wave off with vague explanations. Now I knew where the money went. They ate my roast, they drank my wine, they sat in my dining room and talked about the life my husband had given them while I'd been here alone, believing every lie he told me. My birthday cake sat untouched on the counter. Nobody mentioned it, not once. When they finally left, hugs from Elena that I accepted with stiff arms, a wave from Jason, a careless bye from Mia. I stood at the door and watched them pile into Mark's car. He was driving them back to their hotel downtown. He'd be back later, he said. I closed the door, and then I got to work. Mark came home around 11. I was in the living room, still in my blue dress, a glass of wine untouched in my hand. Laura. He stood in the doorway, shoulders hunched, looking for all the world like a guilty child. "I know that was a lot. I know you need time to process." I said nothing. "I love you," he tried. "I love you both. I know that sounds impossible, but it's true. Elena and I, it just happened. 30 years ago on that trip to Portland. I never meant for it to go this far, but there were kids, and I couldn't just abandon them." Abandon them. He'd abandoned me instead, abandoned our children, piece by piece, lie by lie, for 3 decades. "I'm going to sleep in the guest room," he said when I didn't respond. "Give you space. We can talk tomorrow, figure out how to make this work. A blended family, maybe. People do it all the time." A blended family. Like this was a second marriage. Like I had any say in this arrangement he'd constructed behind my back. "Good night, Mark," I said. He hesitated, searching my face for something. Tears, maybe. Rage. The breakdown he was probably expecting. He found nothing. After his footsteps faded down the hall, after the guest room door clicked shut, I moved to my office, closed the door, sat down at my computer. The screen's glow was the only light. I started with the basics, public records, the kind anyone could access if they knew where to look. Elena Ramirez, 48, Portland, Oregon, not married. 2 children listed. Jason Ramirez, born 25 years ago. Mia Ramirez, born 22 years ago. Father listed on both birth certificates, Mark Thompson. My husband's name on another woman's children's legal documents. I dug deeper. Property records showed a condo purchased 8 years ago, Elena's name on the title, but the down payment came from a wire transfer. I traced the origin, our joint savings account. Credit card statements next. Mark had a second card I'd never seen, maxed out repeatedly over the years. Charges at jewelry stores, restaurants, hotels, all in Portland. All while I thought he was at conferences, meetings, the endless obligations of a man climbing the corporate ladder. Bank records told the rest of the story. Thousands of dollars, year after year, flowing to an account in Elena's name. Tuition payments. Car loans, vacations. He'd built them a life while I'd been building ours, and he'd funded it with money I thought we were saving together. 30 years. Half my life. Married to a lie. I sat back in my chair, the numbers glowing on the screen in front of me, and I felt something shift. Not heartbreak. That would come later, in waves I'd learned to ride. This was colder, clearer. This was the beginning of their unraveling. I waited until morning to call Alex and Becca. Not because I needed to calm down, I was eerily calm, operating on some frequency beyond normal emotion, but because I wanted to think clearly, to present facts, not hysteria. Alex answered on the second ring. "Mom, happy belated birthday. Sorry I couldn't call yesterday. Meetings ran late. How was the big day?" I told him. All of it. The doorbell, the strangers. The 30 years of lies compressed into one devastating evening. Silence on the line. Then, "Mom, that's insane. Are you serious? He just showed up with them?" "On my birthday," I confirmed. Like it was a gift. "I'm booking a flight. I'll be there by—" "No." My voice was firm. "Not yet. I need you to hold off, both of you. Don't confront him. Don't call him. Don't do anything." "Mom, you can't expect me to—" "Alex, listen to me." I paused, gathering my thoughts. "Your father thinks he's revealed some big secret and now we'll all adjust. He thinks I'm going to cry and eventually accept this. I'm not going to do that, but I need time. I need to understand the full picture before I act." He was quiet for a moment, then, "What are you planning?" "I'm not sure yet, but I need you to trust me." "Always, Mom." "Always." Becca was harder. She cried on the video call, mascara running, voice cracking. How could he do this? How could he— 30 years, Mom. We grew up in that house. Were we even real to him? "We were real," I said, steadier than I felt. "We are real. He's the one who built something fake." "What do you need? I can take time off. I need you to be my daughter," I said. "I need you to be strong for me, even from far away. And I need you to wait. Can you do that?" She nodded through tears. "I love you, Mom." "I love you too, sweetheart." After we hung up, I sat with the silence. My children, my real children, were ready to drop everything for me, ready to fight. But this wasn't their battle. Not yet. Their support flowed through me like fuel, burning clean and steady. I wasn't alone. I had never been alone. Mark had no idea what that meant. Here's what Mark never understood about me, what he never bothered to learn. 15 years ago, a client stiffed me. Big account, months of work, and when the bill came due, he vanished. Moved states, changed numbers, left me holding nothing but broken promises and mounting frustration. I could have let it go, written it off as a loss. Instead, I got licensed as a private investigator. It started as a way to track him down, which I did eventually, and he paid every cent. But it became something more, a skill set, a network. I took on small cases, mostly corporate background checks, asset searches, the occasional insurance fraud investigation. Nothing glamorous, nothing Mark would ever notice. He called it my little job, something to keep me busy while he worked his important career. He had no idea. Over the years, I'd built relationships with people in banking, law enforcement, even a contact at the IRS who owed me a favor. I knew how to trace money, how to document evidence, how to build a case that would hold up in any courtroom. And then there was my portfolio. After that first client burned me, I started setting aside money, quietly, consistently. Investments Mark never knew about because he never asked, never cared, never thought his wife's little job could amount to anything substantial. $500,000, tucked into accounts his name would never touch. I sat in my office that morning, the house quiet around me, and I considered my options. I could confront him, scream, cry, throw things, demand answers that would be lies anyway. I could leave, pack a bag, call a lawyer, walk away from 32 years without looking back, or I could wait. I could watch, document, build. I could dismantle everything they thought they had, piece by careful piece, without breaking a single law. Revenge through education, I thought. A lesson in consequences. Mark had spent 30 years believing he could have it all. 2 families, 2 lives, funded by one woman's sacrifices. Elena believed she'd won some prize, snagging a man who provided, while his other wife did the actual providing. Jason and Mia believed the world owed them comfort, handed down from a father whose generosity came from someone else's labor. They were all about to learn how wrong they were. I opened a new document on my computer, typed a single word at the top, evidence, and I began. The first rule of war is knowing your resources. The second is knowing your allies. I started with Sarah. She'd been my neighbor for 12 years, my best friend for 10, retired lawyer, sharp as a blade even at 63, with a bullshit detector that could spot a lie from 3 houses away. 2 days after the birthday ambush, I invited her for coffee, told her everything. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she set down her mug and looked at me with those hawk eyes that used to intimidate witnesses in courtrooms. "Laura, I've known you were too good for him since the day I moved in, but this?" She shook her head. "This is criminal-level deception. 30 years, 2 children with another woman, financial fraud against your marital assets." "I know what it is," I said. "I need to know what to do about it." "Document everything." Her voice shifted into professional mode. "Every bank statement, every lie you can prove, every cent he moved without your knowledge. Build the case before you make a single move. The moment he knows you're coming, he'll try to hide assets." She became my witness, my sounding board, my reminder that I wasn't crazy, that this betrayal deserved a calculated response. Dr. Ellis came next. I'd been seeing him for years, working through the ordinary stresses of marriage and motherhood. He'd always said I had a tendency to suppress anger, to smooth things over for the sake of peace. "Not this time," I told him in our first session after the revelation. He leaned forward, fingers steepled. "What do you want to do with the anger?" "Channel it. Make it productive. I'm not going to scream or cry or give him the satisfaction of watching me fall apart. I'm going to take back everything he stole, my money, my dignity, my life." He nodded slowly. "Then let's make sure you do it in a way that doesn't destroy you in the process." The final piece was Ms. Harper. Victoria Harper, divorce attorney, recommended by Sarah. I walked into her downtown office 2 weeks after my birthday and laid out 30 years of fraud in 45 minutes. She barely blinked. "We can prove dissipation of marital assets," she said, flipping through the preliminary documents I'd brought. "The transfers to Elena's account, the secret credit card, the down payment on that condo, all of it came from joint funds. He owes you half of everything he gave them, possibly more given the deception." "How do we proceed?" Quietly. "For now." She smiled, a sharp, predatory thing. "Let him think you're adjusting. Let him get comfortable. And when we're ready, we hit him with everything at once." I left her office feeling something I hadn't felt since that doorbell rang. Hope. At home, I played my part. The hurt wife, slowly healing. Mark had no idea he was living with an army. The evidence binder started thin. It didn't stay that way. Using my PI credentials and the contacts I'd built over 15 years, I dug into every corner of Mark's double life. What I found made the initial betrayal look like a paper cut compared to a gutting. The second credit card was just the beginning, maxed out repeatedly, payments made from an account I'd never seen. Funded, of course, by business expense reimbursements from his company that he'd quietly redirected. Purchases included jewelry I'd never worn, dinners at restaurants I'd never visited, hotel rooms in cities he'd claimed to be working. Elena's career was next. She called herself a real estate agent, and technically, she had a license. But digging deeper revealed a pattern of fudged credentials, continuing education courses she'd never completed, commissions claimed on deals where the paperwork didn't quite add up. One former client had even filed a complaint that mysteriously went nowhere. I filed that away for later. Mia, the spoiled princess with the smirk, was almost too easy. Her Instagram was a treasure trove. Luxury bags, designer shoes, vacations to places I'd only seen in magazines. But her academic record told a different story. Transcripts from her university showed a pattern of near-failing grades, followed by sudden improvements. A little more digging revealed why. Multiple papers with suspicious similarities to content from online essay mills. She'd been buying her way through college, and nobody had caught it yet. Jason was more careful, but not careful enough. His position at Mark's company violated their nepotism policy. Direct relatives of executives required additional vetting and disclosure, neither of which had happened. He'd been hired through a side door, his relationship to Mark conveniently omitted from the paperwork. Someone in HR had either been fooled or paid off. I documented everything. Screenshots, timestamps, source links. The binder grew thicker by the day, and through it all, Mark remained oblivious. He brought home flowers that first week, suggested couples counseling the second. "I know this is hard," he said over dinner one evening, reaching for my hand, "but I really think we can work through it. Blended families are more common than you'd think." I squeezed his hand back, smiled softly, and said, "Maybe you're right." Inside, I was adding another page to the binder. If only he knew. 3 weeks after my birthday, I became the wife Mark always wanted. Agreeable, understanding, willing to work on things. It was the hardest performance of my life. Every morning I made his breakfast. Every evening I asked about his day. When he mentioned Elena or the kids, I nodded thoughtfully instead of screaming. When he floated ideas about holiday gatherings that included everyone, I said I'd think about it. "You're being so mature about this," he told me one night, genuine relief in his voice. "I was so scared you'd hate me forever, but you're really trying, Laura. I can see it." I was trying, all right. Trying not to show my hand, trying not to let the disgust rise above my smile, trying to maintain the facade long enough to build a case that would leave him with nothing. The nights were the hardest. Mark would fall asleep easily, the sleep of a man who believed he'd gotten away with everything, while I lay awake cataloging lies. Every late night he'd claimed was work, lies. Every business trip to Portland, lies. Every time he'd said we couldn't afford a vacation, a renovation, a small indulgence, lies covering theft. I replayed our marriage like a movie I was watching for the second time, suddenly seeing all the plot holes I'd missed before, the way he always volunteered for the Portland accounts, the phone calls he'd take in another room, the occasional gifts that seemed too expensive for his salary, guilt offerings, I realized now, purchased with money he was also spending on her. But I never let it show. At breakfast, I smiled. At dinner, I listened. In bed, I said goodnight, like nothing had changed. Mark grew more relaxed by the day. He started leaving his phone out again, stopped deleting his call history, mentioned Elena without flinching. He thought he'd won, that his confession had been a weight lifted, and now we were all going to skip happily into some unconventional future. "She's really eager to get to know you better," he said one evening, scrolling through his phone. "Elena, I mean. She thinks you two could actually be friends." Friends. With the woman who'd been sleeping with my husband for 3 decades. "That's sweet," I said mildly. "Maybe someday." I added another entry to the binder that night. Someday was coming, just not the way he imagined. Here's something people don't realize about social media. It's a confession booth with a megaphone. Elena had been posting for years under a semi-private account, private enough that Mark probably thought I'd never find it, public enough that friends of friends could see. It took me 2 days to create a fake profile, gain access through a mutual connection, and start scrolling. What I found made my blood turn to ice, then fire. Hawaii, 2015. Best anniversary trip ever. My man knows how to treat a lady. Photos of Elena in a bikini, Mai Tai in hand, sunset behind her. I remembered 2015. Alex had just had surgery, a minor procedure, but still surgery. And Mark had been stuck at a conference and couldn't come home early. Ski trip, 2018. Mountain views and the love of my life. Mark's face wasn't in the photos, but his jacket was. The same North Face fleece he'd worn in our Christmas card that year. I had been home with Becca during Christmas 2018, making the best of it because Mark's project deadline meant he couldn't take time off. The posts went back years, vacations I never knew about, dinners at restaurants he'd claimed to visit with clients, a whole life documented in filters and hashtags while I was raising his children and managing his household. Mia's Instagram was worse, in a different way, less sneaky, more brazenly entitled. Luxury purchases displayed like trophies. Thanks, Dad, under a photo of a Louis Vuitton bag. Daddy came through, with keys to a new car. Every post, a dagger. Every caption, a confession of how my money had funded her lifestyle. Jason's LinkedIn told its own story. Rapid promotions, glowing recommendations from people in Mark's orbit. A career trajectory that only made sense if someone powerful was greasing every wheel. I screenshotted everything. Timestamps, comments, geotags that proved Mark was somewhere other than where he'd claimed. The evidence binder was becoming an evidence archive. Sarah reviewed it over wine one evening. "This is damning," she said quietly. "A judge will see this and understand exactly who Mark Thompson is." "Good," I replied. The rage I felt looking at those posts, the trips, the gifts, the casual flaunting of everything he'd stolen could have consumed me. But I'd learned something in those weeks of pretending. Rage is fuel. Channeled correctly, it doesn't burn you, it burns them. I saved every file, and I waited. 1 month after my birthday, I made my first move. It was surgical, anonymous, untraceable, unless you were me, which no one suspected. The tip to HR at Mark's company was simple. A concerned inquiry about hiring practices, specifically regarding an employee named Jason Ramirez, whose familial relationship to a senior executive had apparently not been disclosed during the vetting process. I included just enough detail to force an investigation without revealing how I knew. 2 weeks later, I was folding laundry in the hallway when I heard Mark's phone ring. He was in his office, door cracked open, voice carrying. "Dad, they're investigating me." Jason's panic was audible even from where I stood. Someone reported to HR that I was hired without proper disclosure. "They're saying nepotism, Dad. They could fire me." "Calm down." Mark's voice was tight, controlled, but I heard the fear underneath. "It'll blow over. These things always do. I'll talk to some people." "What if it doesn't? What if they find out you pushed my application through? You could get in trouble too." Silence. Heavy, damning silence. "I'll handle it," Mark finally said. "Just keep your head down. Don't talk to anyone." I pressed a shirt, smoothing the wrinkles, and smiled. First domino. Wobbling. That night, Mark was distracted at dinner, picking at his food, checking his phone, brow furrowed with a worry he couldn't explain to me. "Everything okay?" I asked, all innocence. "Work stuff," he said. "Nothing to worry about." I nodded sympathetically and poured him more wine. If only he knew the work stuff was just the beginning. Elena thought she was untouchable. Her social media radiated confidence. Selfies at open houses, posts about closing season, hashtags about boss lady energy. She had no idea her empire was built on sand. The anonymous email to her brokerage was polite, professional, and devastating. A concerned citizen had noticed irregularities in certain transactions, continuing education records that didn't match state databases, a commission claimed on a sale where the timeline didn't add up, attached documentation. I sent it on a Tuesday. By Thursday, the consequences had arrived. Mark was on a speakerphone call with Elena when I walked past his office, carrying fresh towels like the dutiful wife. I paused just outside the door. "Someone is out to get me." Elena's voice was shrill, echoing with a frustration I found deeply satisfying. "I lost the Henderson listing, Mark. Do you understand? That was a $3 million property. They gave it to someone else because of these accusations." "Baby, calm down. It's probably just a disgruntled client." "A client wouldn't know about my license records. Someone is digging. Someone is targeting me. We'll figure it out. I'll hire you a lawyer if..." "With what money? You said things were tight right now." I carried my towels to the linen closet, tucking them neatly into place. Things were tight because I'd been quietly monitoring every account, because Ms. Harper had advised me to track expenditures, because Mark's freedom to fund his other family was about to disappear entirely. The wonderful wife strikes again. Victory 2. Complete. Mia had spent years coasting on Daddy's money and other people's work. It was time for a reckoning. The email to the Dean of Academic Integrity was thorough. Anonymous, of course, but detailed. Specific papers with specific passages that match specific content from known essay mills. Timestamps showing when the original content appeared online versus when Mia submitted her work. A pattern too clear to ignore. I waited. 3 weeks later, Mark came home looking like he'd aged a decade. "It's Mia," he said, dropping onto the couch. "She's been put on academic probation, plagiarism accusations." I set down my book, arranging my face into concern. "That's terrible. What happened?" "Someone reported her. Multiple papers flagged. She could be expelled, Laura. Her entire future. Has she considered just doing her own work?" Mark stared at me like I'd said something in another language. The call came that evening. Mia on speakerphone again. Mark never learned, her voice oscillating between tears and fury. "Daddy, fix it. You have to fix it. Call someone. Donate something. I can't be expelled." "Mia, sweetheart, it's a university. I don't have the same connections there." "Then get them. You always said you'd take care of me." "I'm trying." "Try harder." I listened from the kitchen, washing dishes with the slow satisfaction of a woman watching karma arrive on schedule. The spoiled princess who'd smirked at me on my birthday was finally learning that Daddy couldn't buy her way out of everything. Some lessons have to be earned. 6 weeks in, I suggested a picnic. Mark nearly wept with relief. "Really? You want to spend time with everyone?" "I think it's time we tried," I said, stirring sugar into my tea, "for your sake." The gathering was held at a park near the waterfront, neutral territory, public enough to keep things civil. Elena arrived overdressed. Jason looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. And Mia was sulking, probably still stewing over her academic troubles. We spread blankets, unpacked food, and pretended this was normal. It lasted about 20 minutes. "This potato salad is wonderful, Laura." Elena tried, her voice dripping with that fake warmth I'd come to recognize as her default setting. "Thank you. Old family recipe." "You know, we should really exchange recipes sometime. I make a killer enchilada that Mark just loves." I smiled. "I'm sure you do." Mia, bored with the pleasantries, turned her attention to me. "This must be weird for you," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. "Sharing him, I mean." "Sharing? Dad, like you've had him for so long. Now you have to..." "I'm not sharing anything," I said pleasantly. "Your father made choices. I'm simply observing the consequences." Something flickered in her expression. Unease, maybe. The first hint that the doormat wife might not be as passive as advertised. "You're just jealous," she muttered. I tilted my head. "Of what, dear? Stability?" Silence fell over the blanket. Jason looked at the ground. Elena's smile froze. Mark coughed awkwardly. "We should all try to get along. Elena finally managed. "We can share him. That's what Mark wants." Share him. Like he was a vacation home or a streaming subscription. "Of course," I said sweetly. "Whatever Mark wants." The drive home was quiet. Mark kept glancing at me, trying to read something in my profile. He couldn't see what I was thinking. He never could. 2 months after my birthday, I froze everything. It was surprisingly easy. A call to our bank expressing concern about potential identity theft. Unusual transactions, unfamiliar charges, better safe than sorry. They locked the joint accounts pending review. I had already moved my personal funds to accounts Mark couldn't touch. The fallout was immediate. Mark's card declined at a restaurant with Elena that very night. I know because I heard about it later, through the small recording device I'd placed in his briefcase. Legal in our state for a spouse to monitor shared property. Sarah had confirmed. "Your wife is controlling everything." Elena's voice crackled through the playback, fury barely contained. "She froze the accounts. Who does she think she is?" She said it was for security, identity theft concerns. "That's garbage, Mark. She's cutting you off. She's trying to starve us out." "I'll talk to her. I'll fix it." "You always say that. When are you actually going to do something?" I replayed that recording 3 times, not because I needed to hear it, once was enough, but because each listen reminded me that I was winning, slowly, methodically, but winning. Mark came home that night full of questions. Why the freeze? What was I worried about? Couldn't we just call the bank together? "I found some strange charges," I said calmly. "I wanted to be careful. You understand, right?" "After everything?" The guilt in his eyes was delicious. "Of course," he said. "Of course. I'll give them whatever documentation they need." "Take your time," I replied. "I'm sure it'll all sort itself out." The financial noose tightened another notch. The IRS tip was my masterpiece. I'd learned through my investigation that Mark's gifts to Elena over the years qualified as taxable income, large transfers that should have been reported but never were, the kind of oversight that the Internal Revenue Service takes very seriously. The anonymous report included dates, amounts, account numbers, everything neatly organized, impossible to dismiss. 4 weeks later, the audit notice arrived. Mark's face when he opened that envelope was something I'll treasure forever, the color draining from his cheeks, the way his hands trembled. The silence that stretched for a full minute before he remembered how to speak. "Laura," his voice cracked, "I need your help." I looked up from my book, all innocence. "With what?" "The IRS, there's some kind of audit, financial stuff. You're good with numbers. You handle our taxes. Can you look at this?" I took the letter, scanning it with the measured calm of someone who'd been waiting for this exact moment. "This looks serious," I said. "Unreported income? Mark, what did you do?" "It's complicated. There were some transfers to Elena over the years. I didn't think they counted as gifts over a certain amount are taxable. You know that." "I didn't think it through." I handed the letter back. "You're going to need an accountant, a good one, and probably a lawyer." "Laura, please, can't you—" "I'll help you." I smiled, warm and supportive. "But Mark, I think it's time you told me everything, the whole truth. No more surprises." His eyes welled with what might have been tears. Okay, I'll tell you everything." I nodded, patting his hand. "Sure, honey. Tell me everything." I was recording anyway. The beautiful thing about liars is that they always suspect each other. 3 months after my birthday, the second family was eating itself alive. I barely had to lift a finger. Just watch as their paranoia and selfishness did my work for me. It started with Jason blaming Mia. Through Mark's phone, he'd grown careless again, leaving it unlocked on the kitchen counter. I'd seen the messages. Jason accusing Mia of bringing attention to the family with her flaunting online, her constant posts about daddy's gifts, her designer lifestyle, her shameless displays of wealth. Someone had noticed, he said. Someone was targeting them because of her. If you'd kept your head down like I told you, one text read, none of this would be happening. Mia's response was predictable. Denial, then deflection. Maybe if you hadn't gotten the cushy job through Dad, nobody would be investigating in the first place. Don't blame me for your nepotism. The siblings were at each other's throats, but Elena was worse. A call to Mark, which I overheard through my briefcase device, revealed just how deep the cracks ran. You said you were going to leave her years ago, Elena hissed. That was the deal, Mark. That was always the deal. 20 years of waiting. 20 years of being the secret. And now we're all falling apart because you couldn't keep your promises. Elena, please, I gave you my best years. I raised your children alone while you played house with her. And now what? She's freezing accounts. Someone's sabotaging my career. The IRS is auditing you. This was not the plan. I didn't know any of this would happen. Then you're a fool. She hung up on him. I heard it through the recording, the sharp click, the silence that followed. Mark sat in his car for 20 minutes before coming inside. I know because I watched from the kitchen window. They were all turning on each other, blaming each other, circling like drowning swimmers pulling each other under. And I hadn't even started the confrontations yet. The night I confronted Mark, he came home reeking of Elena's perfume. Cheap, floral, the same scent that had invaded my home on my birthday. He'd been with her, probably trying to calm her down after another crisis, another listing lost, another angry call from a lawyer. I was waiting in the living room. No wine tonight, no soft music, just me, the lamp, and a manila folder on the coffee table. Laura? He stopped in the doorway, sensing something different. Everything okay? Sit down, Mark. We need to talk. He sat. His eyes went to the folder. I've been doing some research, I said calmly, going through our finances, trying to understand how we got into this situation. I slid the folder across the table. Inside, bank statements going back 10 years, withdrawals highlighted in yellow, transfers to accounts I'd never authorized, never known about. Explain this. He opened the folder. His face went pale, then gray, then something close to white. It's investments. Things went bad. I told you about this. You told me about losses. These aren't losses, Mark. These are transfers to an account in Elena's name, hundreds of thousands of dollars over the years. Laura, I can explain. Can you? I kept my voice level, controlled. Every ounce of fury channeled into cold precision. Can you explain how you funded a condo for your mistress with our retirement savings? How you paid for your other children's education while telling me we couldn't afford vacations? How you lied to me for 30 years while I was building our home, raising our children, trusting you completely? I never meant for your other family. The question hung in the air. Were these transfers for your other family, Mark? He couldn't answer, couldn't even look at me. I stood up, collected the folder, and walked toward the door. Laura, wait. Good night, Mark. I left him there, stewing in silence. No screaming, no tears. Just the weight of his own choices pressing down on him. The confrontation was just beginning. Sarah came over the next evening. Officially, it was for wine. Unofficially, it was to witness. I'd known for weeks that Mark would eventually break. The pressure had been building. The audits, the investigations, Elena's fury, his children's crumbling lives. He needed to confess to someone, and I'd made sure there was no one left to confess to except me. Or so he thought. We were in the living room when his phone rang. Elena. He excused himself to take it in the kitchen, but the walls in our house aren't thick, and Sarah and I could hear every word. I'm running out of options, Mark said, voice cracking. The accounts are frozen. The audit is getting worse, and Laura... What about Laura? Elena's voice sharp even through the phone. She knows about the transfers. She found the bank statements. Silence, then. What did you tell her? Nothing. But she's smart, Elena. She's piecing it together. And the money. He paused, lowered his voice, but not low enough. Laura's savings covered a lot of this, her investments, her work. She was making more than I realized. If she finds out I used her money for us, then fix it. Isn't that what you do? Fix things? I can't fix this. I don't know how. Sarah caught my eye across the room. She was recording on her phone. Our state was single-party consent, and she was a party present in the home. Every word Mark said was being documented. He ended the call, came back into the living room trying to compose himself. "Everything all right?" Sarah asked innocently. "Fine, just work stuff." "Of course." She smiled, tucking her phone away. "Work stuff." After she left, I added the recording to the evidence binder. Mark had just confessed to using my money to fund his affair. His own words would convict him. The gathering was my idea. A peace summit, I called it. One more attempt to work things out. They arrived at our house on a Sunday afternoon. Elena in her best dress, Jason sullen, Mia red-eyed from what I assumed was another crying session about her academic probation. Mark greeted them at the door, playing host in a home that had never been theirs. I'd set up the living room carefully, coffee and pastries on the table, everyone arranged in a circle, civilized. They thought they'd won. You could see it in Elena's posture, Mia's returning smirk, even Jason's reluctant presence. They thought this meeting was my surrender, the moment I finally accepted my place in Mark's twisted arrangement. They were wrong. "Thank you all for coming," I began, standing by the fireplace. "I know this has been difficult. For everyone." Nods around the room. Mark looked hopeful. Elena looked smug. "But I think it's time we were all honest with each other. Don't you?" I pulled out my phone, connected it to the Bluetooth speaker on the shelf, pressed play. Mark's voice filled the room. Laura's savings covered a lot of this. Her investments, her work. The color drained from 4 faces simultaneously. If she finds out I used her money for us? Elena was the first to react. "You thief!" She whirled on Mark, finger jabbing. "You told me that money was yours. You said your investments—" "I didn't. You lied to me all these years and you were stealing from her?" Jason stood abruptly, face twisted. "I can't do this." He walked out without looking back. Mia burst into tears. "Daddy, how could you—" Mark turned to me, desperate. "Laura, how did you—" I smiled. The first real smile I'd allowed myself in months. "Knowledge is power, Mark. You should have remembered that before you married a woman smarter than you." The meeting was over. The war had officially begun. Ms. Harper filed the papers on a Tuesday. We'd chosen the timing carefully. Mark would be in his office, surrounded by colleagues, when the process server arrived. Maximum humiliation, minimum escape. The petition cited adultery, fraud, and dissipation of marital assets. Attached, 100 pages of evidence, bank statements, recordings, witness affidavits, Sarah's testimony, my detailed timeline of 30 years of deception. I wasn't home when Mark called. I was sitting in Miss Harper's office watching her phone light up with his number, again and again. "He's persistent," she observed dryly. "He's desperate. There's a difference." When I finally listened to the voicemails, there were 7, ranging from confusion, "Laura, what is this? Can we please talk?" to bargaining, "I'll give you whatever you want, just don't do this," to something approaching anger. "This is crazy. After everything I've done for this family?" Everything he'd done. That phrase echoed in my mind as I drove home. Everything he'd done was exactly the problem. 30 years of lies, hundreds of thousands in stolen money, 2 families played against each other for his convenience. He was waiting in the driveway when I arrived. "Laura, please." His eyes were red. "We can work this out. Marriage counseling, financial arrangements, anything. Just don't take this to court." I stepped around him, keys in hand. "The court will decide what's fair. I love you. I've always loved you." I stopped at the door, turned to look at him. This man I'd built a life with, this stranger who'd been living a double existence I never suspected. "You love yourself, Mark. You always have. I was just convenient." I went inside and locked the door behind me. My silence spoke volumes. Elena's world collapsed faster than even I anticipated. The tax evasion investigation expanded. My tip had opened a door, and the IRS walked through it with forensic accountants and subpoena power. They found years of unreported income, not just Mark's gifts, but commissions she'd hidden, deals she'd misreported, a pattern of deception that went beyond anything I'd documented. Her real estate license was revoked pending the outcome. No license meant no commissions, no income. Worse, the Portland condo, the 3-bedroom sanctuary she'd bragged about, was facing foreclosure. Without Mark's steady stream of funding, she couldn't make the payments. And the down payment that had secured it in the first place? Marital assets, my lawyer argued, subject to recovery. I heard about her unraveling through the recordings I still had access to. Mark's desperate calls growing more frequent, more panicked. "This is your fault!" Elena screamed in one conversation. "You told me you had everything under control. You told me she'd never find out. I didn't know she could. You didn't know anything. You underestimated her completely, and now we're all paying for it. I'm trying to fix this." "It's too late for fixing. My career is destroyed. My home is being taken. The kids are falling apart. What exactly are you going to fix, Mark?" Their calls grew shorter after that, more accusatory, less like partners and more like adversaries. The second family was turning on their patriarch, the man who'd promised to take care of them, who'd funded their lives with someone else's money, was now a liability, a failure, a fraud. I added each recording to the evidence binder. The walls were closing in. Jason was fired on a Thursday. The HR investigation had been thorough, aided by anonymous documents that mysteriously appeared in their system. I'd never confirm how. The nepotism violation was clear. Jason had been hired through irregular channels, his relationship to Mark deliberately concealed. The company's policy was unambiguous, and their lawyers advised termination. He blamed Mark, called him screaming, according to the recordings. "You ruined my life. I had a career. I had a future, and you couldn't even do the paperwork right? I was trying to help you." Help? This is help? I'm unemployable now. Every background check will show I was fired for ethics violations. My resume is worthless. The golden boy who'd smirked at me from across my birthday dinner table was now unemployed, unhireable, and utterly lost. Mia followed 2 weeks later. The plagiarism investigation had escalated from probation to expulsion. Too many papers, too clear a pattern. The university's Academic Integrity Board ruled unanimously. Her reaction was predictable: tears, tantrums, demands that Daddy fix it. But Daddy couldn't fix anything anymore. Daddy was drowning in his own legal troubles, his assets frozen, his marriage disintegrating. "You promised you'd always take care of me," Mia sobbed in a call I overheard. "You promised." "I'm trying, sweetheart." "You're not trying hard enough. None of this would have happened if you just stayed with her and kept the money coming." Stayed with her. Me. The wife they'd dismissed. The woman they'd invaded on her birthday. The wonderful Laura who was supposed to smile and accept her humiliation. I wondered if Mia remembered her smirk now. If she remembered saying, "Isn't this exciting? Excitement has consequences." They were learning that the hard way. The final weeks before the court date were almost sad to watch. Almost. Mark had moved into the guest room permanently. My choice, not his. He spent his evenings on the phone with lawyers, accountants, anyone who might help him salvage something from the wreckage. But there was nothing to salvage. I'd anticipated every move he might make. When he tried to hide assets, I'd already documented them. When he attempted to transfer funds, the accounts were frozen. When he claimed certain properties were premarital, I produced records showing they'd been purchased with joint money. His lawyer warned him repeatedly, I learned later. "She has everything. You need to settle." But Mark couldn't accept it. couldn't believe that the wife he'd dismissed, the woman whose little job he'd ignored, had outmaneuvered him completely. He started appearing at the bedroom door, knocking softly at night. "Laura, can we talk, please?" I never answered. "I made mistakes," he said through the door one evening. "Terrible mistakes, but everything I did was for all of us, both families. I was trying to take care of everyone. All of us. Both families." I lay in bed staring at the ceiling and felt nothing but cold satisfaction. There was never an us that included them, Mark. There was me, raising your children, building your home, funding your betrayal, and there was them, taking everything you gave them with money you stole from me. "Laura, please," he tried again. "I love you. I never stopped loving you." I reached over and turned off the lamp. Some silences are louder than words. The King County Courthouse rose against the Seattle skyline like a monument to consequences. Gray stone, tall windows, the kind of building designed to make you feel small standing before it. I'd driven past it 1,000 times without thinking. Now I was walking up those steps, heels clicking against marble, ready to end a 32-year marriage in a room full of strangers. Miss Harper met me at the entrance. She looked sharp, charcoal suit, briefcase heavy with evidence, the focused energy of a predator scenting blood. "How are you feeling?" she asked. "Ready?" And I was. 5 months of preparation had led to this moment. Every document organized, every witness confirmed, every piece of evidence cataloged and cross-referenced. Mark thought he was walking into a negotiation. He was walking into a reckoning. The courtroom was smaller than I'd imagined. Wood paneling, fluorescent lights, rows of seats that reminded me of a church. Appropriate, I thought, for a day of judgment. I took my place at the plaintiff's table and waited. Mark arrived with his lawyer, a nervous-looking man who'd clearly warned his client this wouldn't go well. Mark's suit was rumpled, his face gaunt from sleepless nights. He tried to catch my eye as he sat down. I looked straight ahead. In the gallery behind him sat Elena, Jason, and Mia. They'd come to support him, or maybe to witness the damage, hoping it wouldn't spread to them. Elena wore that same desperate confidence, chin high as if appearance could change reality. Jason stared at the floor. Mia was texting. They still thought this would be amicable, that I'd accept some settlement, divide assets quietly, let them slink back to Portland with their lives intact. They didn't know what was coming. The bailiff announced the judge, Honorable Margaret Chen, known for her sharp questions and zero tolerance for deception. Perfect. I folded my hands on the table. Calm exterior, masking the storm within. Let it begin. Ms. Harper opened like a surgeon making the first incision. Precise, deliberate, devastating. Your Honor, this case is not simply about divorce. It is about systematic financial fraud perpetrated against my client over 3 decades. Mr. Thompson maintained a secret family while siphoning marital assets to fund their lifestyle. The evidence is extensive, documented, and irrefutable. She started with the bank statements. Exhibit after exhibit projected on a screen for the court to see. Transfers highlighted in yellow, adding up to a staggering total. $300,000, Ms. Boy, Harper announced, letting the number hang in the air. Diverted from joint accounts to Elena Ramirez and her children over 30 years. Money that should have funded the Thompson family's retirement, their children's education, their shared future, stolen to maintain Mr. Thompson's parallel life. Mark's lawyer objected weakly. These were gifts, Your Honor, personal decisions that... Gifts from marital assets require spousal consent, Judge Chen interrupted. Continue, Ms. Harper. The evidence parade continued. Credit card statements showing purchases in Portland, jewelry, vacations, dinners, while I was told we couldn't afford extras. Property records showing the condo's down payment traced directly to our savings. Jason's tuition payments, Mia's car, Elena's business expenses, all funded by money Mark had no right to spend alone. Then came the witnesses. Sarah took the stand first, composed and articulate. She described the birthday ambush in detail, how I'd called her the next morning, voice steady but hollow, laying out the betrayal that had shattered my world. "Laura is the strongest person I know," Sarah said, looking directly at Mark. "What he did would have destroyed most people. She chose to fight instead." Alex and Becca couldn't be there in person, work and distance, but their affidavits were read into the record. Alex described learning his father had other children, the betrayal of discovering Jason worked at Mark's company, while Alex had been told there were no openings. Becca's statement was shorter, but sharper. "My father didn't just lie to my mother. He lied to all of us. Every memory I have of him is now contaminated." I watched Mark flinch at his children's words, his real children, the ones he'd shortchanged for decades. Each exhibit was another nail, each witness another nail. By the time Ms. Harper finished her opening presentation, the coffin was nearly built. Mark's lawyer made his arguments, mitigating circumstances, emotional complexity, a man torn between two families trying to do right by everyone. Judge Chen listened impassively. Then she turned to Ms. Harper. "What is the current financial status of your client?" Ms. Harper smiled, that sharp, predatory expression I'd come to appreciate. "Your Honor, Mrs. Thompson has been entirely self-sufficient throughout this marriage, despite her husband's attempts to diminish her contributions. She maintained a career as a financial consultant and private investigator, building a professional reputation and client base that her husband consistently dismissed as a little job." She paused for effect. "Mrs. Thompson has independent assets exceeding $500,000, investments made through her own income, held in accounts entirely separate from the marital funds Mr. Thompson was draining." The courtroom went silent. Mark's face transformed, confusion first, then disbelief, then something close to horror. How? The word escaped before he could stop it, loud enough for everyone to hear. How is that possible? I allowed myself a small smile. For 32 years, he dismissed my work, barely glanced at my earnings. Never thought to wonder what I was doing with the money from clients who trusted me with their futures. His greed had blinded him. His arrogance had convinced him I was just a housewife with a hobby. He'd been so focused on hiding his own secrets that he never considered I might have some of my own. Mr. Thompson had no knowledge of these assets, Ms. Harper continued, because he never bothered to ask. He assumed his wife's contributions were negligible. He was wrong. Judge Chen made a note. "So Mrs. Thompson is not financially dependent on the marital assets?" "No, Your Honor. But she is entitled to recovery of what was stolen. The $300,000 diverted to Mr. Thompson's second family came from joint funds that included her earnings. She wants it back." I watched Mark slump in his chair. The victim he'd expected to find in this courtroom, the broken woman begging for scraps, didn't exist. He'd married someone stronger than he ever realized. Now he was paying for the mistake. Ms. Harper wasn't finished. "Your Honor, I'd like to address the current status of the individuals who benefited from Mr. Thompson's fraud." She turned toward the gallery where Elena sat rigid, sensing danger. "Elena Ramirez is currently under investigation by the Internal Revenue Service for tax evasion. The unreported income, gifts from Mr. Thompson totaling tens of thousands annually, constitutes a federal offense. Her real estate license has been revoked pending criminal charges. The Portland condominium purchased with marital assets is in foreclosure." Elena's face went white. She started to stand as if to flee, but a bailiff near the door shifted position, a subtle warning. "Jason Ramirez," Ms. Harper continued, "was terminated from his position at Meridian Technologies for nepotism violations. His hire was facilitated by Mr. Thompson through irregular channels, concealing their familial relationship. He is currently unemployed." Jason didn't look up. His shoulders hunched forward like a man absorbing blows. "Mia Ramirez was expelled from Portland State University for academic dishonesty. Multiple instances of plagiarism were documented, ending her academic career." Mia's texting stopped. She stared at the lawyer with something between shock and fury, as if this public accounting of her failures was somehow more unfair than the cheating that caused them. In summary, Ms. Harper concluded, the individuals Mr. Miha Thompson defrauded his wife to support have all faced consequences for their actions. The lifestyle he provided them was built on stolen money and ethical violations. It has collapsed accordingly. Elena stood abruptly. This is ridiculous. I'm not staying for this. Ms. Ramirez, Judge Chen's voice cut through the room like ice. I'd advise you to remain seated. I understand there's an outstanding warrant related to your tax investigation. Leaving this courthouse would be inadvisable. Elena froze, looked toward the bailiffs who had moved closer to the exits, looked at Mark who couldn't meet her eyes. She sat back down. The woman who'd walked into my home on my birthday, touched my arm with false sympathy, suggested we could share my husband. She was trapped now, caught in the collapse of everything she'd thought she'd won. Cowardice exposed, consequences delivered. I didn't smile. I didn't need to. When Ms. Harper called me to testify, I walked to the witness stand with steady steps. No trembling, no tears. 5 months of fury had been refined into something harder, sharper, a blade I'd been honing for this moment. The oath was administered. I sat down, adjusted the microphone, and looked out at the courtroom. Mark sat at his table, diminished, defeated. Elena was pale and still in the gallery. Jason and Mia had stopped pretending this was anything other than a disaster. Mrs. Thompson, Ms. Harper began, in your own words, please describe the impact of your husband's actions on your life. I took a breath, let it out slowly. For 32 years, I built this marriage. I raised our children while he traveled. I managed our home while he climbed his career ladder. I forgave the late nights, the distance, the times he wasn't there when I needed him. I trusted him completely. My voice was steady, the fury finally finding its release, not in screaming, but in clarity. He built a lie, 3 decades of deception, a second family I never knew existed, funded with money I helped earn, raised in comfort while I was told we couldn't afford vacations. I paused, letting the words settle. He walked into my home on my 55th birthday with his mistress and their children, and announced it like it was a gift, like I should be grateful for the chance to blend with the family he'd hidden from me. I turned to look directly at Mark. You thought you could have everything, didn't you? 2 families, 2 lives, and a wife too naive to notice. You thought I'd crumble when you told me, that I'd cry and beg and eventually accept whatever scraps you offered. He was crying now, tears running down his face, shoulders shaking. You thought wrong. I looked at Elena next, then Jason, then Mia. You all thought wrong. You took from me for 30 years, my money, my husband's time, my children's inheritance, and you walked into my home like you'd won something. I turned back to Judge Chen. I'm not asking for vengeance, Your Honor. I'm asking for what's mine, what was always mine, the dignity he stole, the money he diverted, the truth he buried for 3 decades. My voice didn't waver. I'm asking for justice. Judge Chen delivered her ruling with the precision of someone who'd seen exactly what happened and had no patience for pretense. The evidence in this case is overwhelming. Mr. Thompson engaged in systematic financial fraud against his spouse, diverting marital assets to support a second family without consent or disclosure. This court finds entirely in favor of the petitioner. She listed the terms, each one a victory. The house, mine. 32 years of mortgage payments, maintenance, and memories. It belonged to me now, free and clear. Alimony, substantial. Mark would be paying for years, a monthly reminder of the life he'd destroyed. Asset repayment, ordered. The $300,000 he'd diverted would be recovered through seizure of his remaining assets and garnishment of future earnings. The Portland condo, subject to recovery proceedings. The down payment had come from marital funds. Elena would lose it entirely. Mark sat motionless as the judgment was read. His lawyer whispered something, probably about appeals, but Mark didn't respond. He looked like a man watching his life collapse in real time, because he was. When it was over, when the gavel fell and the proceedings closed, I stood and gathered my things. Miss Harper shook my hand, professional satisfaction in her grip. "You did it," she said quietly. "Everything we planned." "We did it," I corrected. "I couldn't have done this alone." Mark passed me on his way out. Broken, broke, alone. "Laura," he tried one last time. "Please." I walked past him without a word. Behind me, I heard Elena arguing with bailiffs about the warrant, heard Mia crying, heard Jason saying nothing at all. Vindication complete. 6 months later, I sold the house. Too many memories in those walls, too many years of a life that had been half illusion. I took the money, substantial, after the settlement, and bought a beach condo overlooking the Pacific. 2 bedrooms, a balcony facing the sunset, and enough space for the people who actually mattered. Alex flew in for the housewarming. Becca took a week off to help me decorate. We hung photos, real ones of real family moments, and laughed at how much lighter everything felt without the weight of Mark's lies. Sarah moved 2 buildings down. "You didn't think I'd let you have all this sunshine to yourself?" she said, carrying boxes into her new place. "Besides, someone needs to keep you company when you're not busy being a badass." We have wine on my balcony most evenings now, watching the water, talking about everything and nothing, grateful for the friendship that helped me survive. Mark lives in a studio apartment across town. I know because the alimony checks come from that address. He's tried to contact me, emails, letters, even a handwritten apology that arrived on what would have been our anniversary. I threw them all away unread. Some bridges don't get rebuilt. Some forgiveness isn't owed. Elena's condo was foreclosed. Last I heard, she'd moved in with relatives while fighting her tax case. Jason works retail somewhere, rebuilding from nothing. Mia dropped off social media entirely. No more "thanks, Dad" posts when Dad has nothing left to give. I don't think about them often. They're not worth the energy. What I think about is this: the sunset painting the water gold, the sound of waves through the open window, the knowledge that I built this life with my own hands, not the scraps of a lying husband's double existence, my work, my money, my choices. I'm 66 years old. I have decades left to live, and I'm finally free. So what did I learn after everything? Justice isn't vengeance. Vengeance is fire that burns everything it touches, including yourself. I watched people choose that path, and I saw where it led them: bitterness, obsession, destruction that consumed the destroyer. Justice is different. Justice is balance. It's taking back what was stolen without becoming what hurt you. It's standing in a courtroom with evidence instead of rage, with patience instead of fury, with the quiet certainty that truth outlasts every lie. Family isn't blood. I learned that the hard way. Mark shared DNA with Jason and Mia, and look what that got them. A father who disappeared when the money ran out, loyalty that evaporated the moment consequences arrived. Real family is loyalty. It's the people who show up when the truth is ugly and love you anyway. Sarah, who witnessed everything and never wavered. Alex and Becca, who chose their mother over comfortable denial. Dr. Ellis and Ms. Harper, who helped me fight when fighting felt impossible. They thought I was just a wife, just a mother, just a woman who'd smile and accept whatever crumbs fell from his double life. They didn't know I was the one quietly building an empire while he was busy building lies. If you've ever been underestimated, if you've ever been betrayed by someone who should have loved you, I want to hear your story. Drop your city in the comments. Let's see where all my strong survivors are watching from tonight. If this story meant something to you, hit that like button and subscribe. Share it with someone who needs to know. Secrets always surface. And patience is the sharpest weapon. Until next time, remember this: the best revenge isn't loud. It's living well while they watch everything they built on your back crumble to dust. Stay strong.